All right, hey there, folks. Even with convention signings and live events back on track, I figured I would keep bringing book tour to you. So, welcome to Russ's Rockin' Rollercoaster, intriguing interviews with creative minds. Well, tonight is our 2023 season finale. So, I wanted to end the year with something special, a give back to all the fans and writers out there who have been supporting the show since the beginning. And with so many writers out there looking to place stories in genre fiction, including sci-fi, fantasy, and horror, I thought it would be a good time to have some real talk with the editors and publishers of some of the leading genre magazines. On our panel tonight is Neil Clark, the multi-award winning editor of Clark's World magazine and over a dozen anthologies, including Best Science Fiction of the Year. Welcome, Neil.
Hello.
All right. Also on our panel is Wendy Wagner, award-nominated editor-in-chief of Nightmare Magazine and managing editor of Lightspeed Magazine. Wendy is also a science fiction and horror author of multiple short stories and novels. Welcome, Wendy.
Hey.
All right. And rounding out our panel is Sean Wallace, who has served as co-editor on Clark's World magazine, the Dark and Fantasy magazine. Sean is also the founder, publisher, and manager of Prime Books. Welcome, Sean.
Hello.
All right. So just hold on. We got a little techie thing going on here. Start about that. There we go. Just a heads up to the folks at home. Feel free to send me notes or questions you have for the panel in the chat box during the show, and we'll get to a few at the end. All right. So we're going to jump in. So just so that we're clear for the audience, we're going to go one at a time. So what I'd like you to do is just take a minute and let folks know about your particular publication. What kind of stories are you looking for? What's the format of your publication? And how often do you publish? Neil, let's start with you.
Okay. Clark's World is a monthly online ebook, print, and audio magazine. We publish primarily science fiction, but also some fantasy and some blended genre stuff. We don't do any horror per se, but we do take blended science fiction horror or fantasy horror. Yeah, I think that about covers it.
So in terms of the kind of fiction you're looking for, what kind of submissions are you looking for? How long?
1,000 to 22,000 words in length. Like I said, we try not to get too specific on what we're looking for. We'd like to be surprised, but we have a long list of things in our guidelines that we don't want, ranging from zombies all the way down to talking swords.
Fair enough. All right, Wendy, what do we got?
Well, Nightmare is a monthly horror publication. We appear in ebook at the beginning of the month, and then we publish a short story or poem or creative nonfiction piece free every week on our website. So you can get that all bundled together as an ebook, or you can get it free drizzled out throughout the month online. And our focus is horror and dark fantasy. We have a wide variety of lengths that we look for because we publish flash fiction and flash size creative nonfiction and poetry, and then short fiction all the way from 1,500 to 7,500 words. We're going to open again submissions in January, which is the first time we will have been open to subs for quite a while because I've had sort of a wild year. And when people are getting ready to submit, they should probably know that it's really tough for me to buy stories that are longer than 5,000 words because I have a pretty tight budget. We publish dark fantasy and horror equally. So, I feel like those are sort of a spectrum of genres, and I'm not too fussed about, defining them too much. Just surprise me. And as to what dark means, it doesn't necessarily have to be scary. There's a full range of what dark fiction can be. It's a huge gamut, ranging from weird things that just make you feel sort of like, Kafka-esque kind of weird, all the way to downright screaming Stephen King stuff. But we like seeing it all. And yeah, so when we open, we're going to be looking for all the stuff, all the flash poetry, the under 1,500 word creative nonfiction, uh, short stories, you name it. So it should be, we're excited to see what comes out.
All right, Sean. So what about you? What's talk to us about the dark?
Sure, it's been around since 2013, and we specialize in publishing 2 original stories per month, along with 2 reprints. And we primarily focus on dark fantasy and horror, about, I would say, 2,000 words to about 6,000 words. And it can range from either historical to contemporary horror. Um, the type of fiction that we tend to publish tends to be, I'd say, subtle. It makes you feel uneasy. Um, Primarily literary, of course. We come out online on the first of the month, along with digital editions. We're always open, and we're always very fast.
All right, fair enough. All right, so one of the things I wanted to talk about is that so the internet has given a voice to many writers around the world. But just because there are more writers, that doesn't automatically make them better. Based on what you're seeing over the last couple of years, is the quality of sci-fi, fantasy, and horror writing getting better, getting worse, or about the same as in years past? Wendy, what do you think?
I started reading Slush when I was assistant editor of fantasy back in like 2012. And so I haven't been in this business as long as Sean or Neil, so I don't have quite their range of Slush expertise to draw upon. But I actually do feel like we are seeing more high quality submissions in our submissions, queue. And I think a big part of that is that we've got a real renaissance right now of just great, easy to access writing workshops and places teaching classes online or in person. I feel like it's never been easier to take a class with an established, well-respected writer or with people who have a lot of experience teaching. And there's just the advent of Zoom classes, I think, has really opened the doors for a lot of people to learn a lot about the craft of writing very quickly. So I feel like, in the last 5 or 8 years, just really sort of steadily seeing a lot of the submissions quality go up. And I'm sure that might be diluted, if I've been closed all this year, so I haven't seen some of the terrible things that have happened to some other magazines when it comes to terrible submissions. But, if they're coming from humans, I think humans are getting better and better at learning how to submit and write.
All right. Sean, what about you? Over the last couple of years, quality, better, same, worse?
I'd say the same. What has shifted is the access to online submission systems has meant a more diverse slush. And so, we are seeing stories from all over the world with different styles, different approaches, a different language. So I think it's making for a better slush experience. And I think that makes for a better magazine in the long run.
Neil, what about you?
I agree with Sean there. In our case, I spend a lot of time tracking the submissions data. So we have a tiered submission letter process, and our top tier has been steadily about 2 to 3%. So the number of people submitting has gone up, but that 2 to 3% has remained pretty steady. So there's more people submitting quality work just because there's more people submitting. But overall, it's still about the same.
All right. So when you engage with writers or they engage with you, in terms of, and this is a combination of, what's on the page and then how they actually interact with you. what are you most looking for? What are you looking for from the writers? What's most important to you, and what are your biggest absolute no-nos? So, Neil.
Don't bore me. No, I've read a lot. And so I know that there's a limit to the amount of new types of stories, but everybody has a distinct take on things, and I want you to embrace that and surprise me. I want a story that makes me think or feel. That those are the two things that tend to grab me. My acid test for a story is, do I remember it the next day? And that's when you're going through 1,000 to 1,200 stories a month. They kind of blur together. So the ones that stand out tend to be remembered the next day. I realize it's extremely hard for an author to take and use, but it's what I would advise them to do in that case is maybe read Slush for a while, because that'll help them sort of get a sense for what I'm talking about.
Right. Okay. Sean, what about you?
I would say that don't censor yourself in regards to, don't send us whatever you have. Don't second guess yourself, I guess. Another thing would be, don't tell me about the story in the cover letter. I'm looking for reasons to reject your story. And in a lot of cases, if you tell me that your story is science fiction set 500 years from now, well, that's clearly a violation of my submission guidelines. So read the submission guidelines, follow the rules, format your manuscript properly. We're all looking for pretty much the same thing. We're looking for something that really shines out of the slush. I look at 600 a month, and you really have to stand out of those. And I'm taking only 2 stories a month, unlike Neil, who's taking maybe 6 to 8 a month out of 1,200. So I'm taking 2 out of 600, and you need to format the stories properly. Your cover letter needs to be straightforward and short. I don't want to be looking for reasons to reject your submission out of hand. It makes it really easy in that case. Give me every opportunity to make me want to read your story from beginning to end, or at the very least, the first couple of paragraphs.
All right, fair enough. And you touched on something that I'm gonna follow up in a minute, but I just want to hear from Wendy. What about you?
Well, I think for me at Nightmare, one of the most important qualities of the kinds of horror that we're looking for is that it needs to be very well grounded in a human point of view. Not that it has to be told by a human, but a fully fledged, very their immersive world and voice, and so that's like the main thing that I'm looking for when I first look at that front page, is just, does it absorb me? Do I feel swallowed up in this story, or am I checking my watch? Does this noun feel completely like, can I figure out what's going on? But more importantly than can I figure out what's going on, can I feel something as I read this? And if it's just words on the page, then I'm not going to make it very far.
All right, so hit me where I live is what you're saying.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right. So Sean, you had said something interesting, because I want to talk about this in a significant way. Is that you say don't censor yourself, like don't censor yourself, don't second guess yourself.
Yes.
However, and I'm going to say, however, in today's, and I'm just saying this loosely, in today's woke culture, and the definition of what that is seems to shift. We're certainly being challenged over the last several years. We've been challenged certainly as writers to think more about what we say, how we say it, and if we should say it in ways that I've never seen in my lifetime. And I've been a professional writer for almost 30 years. There's such a hyperactive cancel culture out there that as a writer, it's made taking chances and not censoring yourself harder and harder to do, out of fear of being nearly ruined if you happen to upset someone. So what do you say to writers who bring up touchy subjects in their work or use dialogue that may in fact be the way people actually talk, even if it may seem harsh, crude, or offensive? Is there room in your publications anyway, is there room in genre fiction to make readers feel uncomfortable? Or as writers, do you think that we're being backed into a corner where we have very few options other than to play it safe? So Sean, since you brought it up, we'll start with you.
And it's been pretty rare in dark fantasy and hard to be an issue, at least with regards to the type of submissions that we publish. But I would say this, that if I feel like a submission may be problematic, then I will refer to others who are perhaps a little bit more experienced, either in that culture, with that writing approach, with that theme. There have been times where I've read a story and I've not completely understood where they've come from. And so I will inquire of the author, what were you trying to achieve by going in this particular direction? Is there some cultural context to this that perhaps wasn't fully explained, and do we need to enlarge on that?
And I'm assuming you're talking about only in those stories that you might actually consider, because if it's just an outright rejection anyway, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Right.
But I don't look at stories and automatically think, well, this is approaching politics or some social issue, and automatically go, no, I'm not going to consider this. I'm considering the story on its own merits whenever possible. And that's pretty much it.
And I think it may be more of an issue, less of an issue kind of in the dark fiction and horror world, but I think in my own experience, it seems to be more prevalent on the sci-fi fantasy side. So Neil, what's your take on all this?
Well, yeah, I still look at the merits of the story first. That comes first and foremost, and then if there's conversations to be had with the author, if I'm comfortable publishing that type of story is always a question. Doesn't matter whether or not it's controversial. There's things that aren't controversial that I don't want to publish because I don't think they're like, I don't do violence against children. That's just no for me. But there's going to be situations where you're going to want to bring in a sensitivity reader and get their take on it. You might want to have that conversation with the author. Did you mean it this way? Because sometimes they didn't. That's actually happened a couple of times where that conversation has been with the author, and they're like, oh, that has two meanings. Okay, let's straighten this out here so that it's less likely to be misinterpreted, because that wasn't what you intended, apparently. So there's going to be things like that come along, and you just sort of have to if working with an author, it's a trust relationship. Both of us are involved in the presentation of that story. I don't want to see them get hurt. I think that tends to be the thing I look at first. I'm not as worried about me. And we've been dragged through the coals, and I won't talk much about that, but I'll acknowledge that it does stick in the back of my head, because I don't want to see somebody else hurt like that.
Right, fair enough. So Wendy, I want to ask you, and we'll start with you on this next question. So many writers that I know who are submitting to various publications, many complain that many publications at least they feel this way, that they keep going back to the well with the same authors kind of getting preferential treatment, and getting repeatedly published. What's your attitude about and your appetite for working with writers you've never published before, as opposed to working with writers who you already have a relationship with?
Well, it's terrific to get to work with all kinds of writers. Like, a big part of what I want for Nightmare is for it to be part of the horror community, this community of creators, and making that circle big and welcoming, I think, is extremely important. Yeah, so I mean, we buy a ton of work from the slush pile that's from people I've never published before, and that's fun and cool and neato.
Neil, what about you?
I love working with new authors. That whole theory of we'll only publish the authors we know is why at the end of every year I publish sort of a report card that says here's the number of authors we published, here's the number of authors who were published for the first time in the magazine, and here's the number of first sales that were in the magazine. And we have a decent number of first sales. We have one in this issue, so we really love having that happen. We think that's really, it's extremely important for short fiction for new authors to be introduced in a magazine, and we make sure that we put some effort towards that and letting authors know that they're welcome.
All right, fair enough. All right, and Sean, what about you?
Well, I would say this is that, as someone who has read science fiction, fantasy, and horror, dating back, that was published from the 1930s onwards, is that I've read a lot, but it is a real joy to come across a new talent in the field. When I come across someone in the slush that is new to me, whether they've been published somewhere else, they're still new to me. And I get really excited. Sometimes I run off to my wife and say, you need to read this. Or I go to Neil and say, you need to read this. Or, when you're overcome by that desire, just say, I need to publish this. Especially if it's a new author to your magazine, it's very rewarding, to be honest.
All right, fair enough. So, as editors, publishers, you obviously can't accept every submission, nor do you, and nor should you. But when rejecting a story, do you simply ghost the author? Do you send back a form letter, or do you offer specific reasons as to why the story was rejected? Neil, what's your policy? How do you handle it?
We do form letters. We just have so many submissions per month. There's no way we could provide feedback on them. Even if we took 5 minutes, it would turn into half my monthly hours.
Okay. And Sean?
We do form rejection letters. I pride myself on being fast with them. And so we're talking anywhere between a few minutes to a few hours later in the day. With 600, it does add up. Even if I spend a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes per submission, that does add up. And I think it's more important to get that rejection back to the author so that they can send it on to another market. There have been a few times where I have modified the form rejection. So maybe like a second tier rejection, saying, I really enjoyed what you did with the story. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, maybe I already have a story like that I've already accepted. There's only so many stories about vampires I can run in a 6-month period, but I'll invite them to submit again, and tell them just how much I did enjoy their story, and that they're more than welcome to keep at it.
Okay. And Wendy, so what's your, do you have a formal policy, an informal policy?
Well, my take is, I think I might be the only one of us here who's like a submitting writer right now. And I tell you, I hate personal rejection with every fiber of my being. Almost every personal rejection that I've ever gotten, I'm just like, you're so wrong. Everything you say, it's terrible, and I hate you. And then when I got promoted to be the editor at Nightmare, I'm like, I'm not going to give personal rejection, because if there's anybody out there that's like me, that's just going to make them grumpier. So, you just get a nice, friendly form rejection. I've got one that's like for the people who are, like a little bit higher tier that, you really, really hope they're submitting again. And one that's, just kind of encouraging people to keep on trying to find a new home for that thing. But that's why I do what I do, because, well, I mean, and time helps, it's like, boy, you get 1,200 submissions, you just got to get them out the door sometime. But yeah.
So basically, thanks, but no. Okay. All right. So as an editor, when you've accepted a story, or you think you want to, but you feel that it's close, but maybe it's not quite there. Do you give heavy suggestions? Do you do lots of line edits? Or do you take a little bit more of a gentle, softer approach? Wendy, what's your style?
Well, when I only buy stories if I feel like they could be published with no editing, because I just feel like that's important, that I should be able to run, if something happens, I could run that story without it being edited. Occasionally a story will come through the slush pile that I think has tremendous potential, but maybe like the ending, that something about it's just not working, and then I will send a revise and resubmit request, and see if I can work with that writer to do something with the piece that makes it, for me, feel more ready to rumble. That's not to say that I run stories at Nightmare that don't get edited. Every story like that gets printed goes through an editorial process, but I just don't want to feel like I'd ever be in a position, because the writer has the final say in approving the edit. So it's like, I would never want to take a story that I thought, oh yeah, I can edit this and just get rid of this one thing that's really bothering me, like, I don't know, something that I just didn't really think worked. I'd never want to be in that position. So.
Okay. Sean, what about you?
I would say because the competition for the slots is so intense, and so, for the Dark, it's only 2 originals for each month, that it's been a rare case where I've come across a story that needed even moderate editing, to be honest. And so at the point that I'm accepting a story, it's already 99% there. There are a few instances where I've had to tell an author, your story ended 2 paragraphs away from where you wrapped up here. And there's been, a couple cases where we've just gone ahead and deleted the last 2 paragraphs, and it made for a better story. But beyond that, no, the competition is simply so high that, and the quality of the submissions equally pretty high, that moderate to heavy editing is usually not required. No.
So you're looking for ready to go.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yep.
So Neil, what about you? What's your approach?
I'm more like Wendy on this one. I'll send a revise and resubmit request on stories that have deal breaker edits, is what I call them. They're a change that has to happen for me to be able to sign off on it. Otherwise, I probably have edits for it, but am I going to be heartbroken if they say no on them? Probably not. So that tends to be where we fall.
All right, a quick interlude for the folks who came in a little late. If you have any questions or comments for the panel, put them in the chat box, and we'll get to a few at the end. All right, so I've been waiting on this one, and I know the panel has too. We're going to address the digital elephant in the room. So we're going to start with Neil on this one, because I know he's had a lot of experience here. Talk to me about the impact of AI on your publication, how you've been dealing with it, and what you think it means for the future of your publication and others like it.
Well, we were sort of the canary in the coal mine. We got hit very early on, and it swamped our submission system. We had to shut down, and it became sort of something of a media firestorm at that point. So not only was I shut down, but I had every reporter in the country calling me. And it just made it, the quality was not at issue. The quality was consistently terrible. Amongst the worst stories I've ever seen. And consistently bad. So I'm not worried about authors being replaced in the near future. What I'm worried about is discoverability. Swamping the slush pile may cause more people to close their slush piles, either or do fewer windows or whatever, and that harms new authors, and authors that it doesn't matter if they're brand new authors or just first time submitting. You see somebody new come into the submission system, and you've been swamped with all of these things. You get a little bit nervous. Are they trying to scam you? Because for a while there, half of them were. Our submissions volume doubled at peak. We've because I wrote the submission software that we use, I started making tweaks to it to address some of my concerns in there. And what I did was I started looking at this like what it is. It's spam. These are not typically people from within the science fiction and fantasy community. These are outsiders trying to make a quick buck. There are some authors who are legitimately trying to work with it. We don't want anything to do with it. There's some ethical and legal issues that we just don't feel like getting involved in at the moment. But the real problem is clogging up the system, burning out our team, and we've dealt with that by building a pseudo spam filter and assigning a priority on things so that if your submission looks suspicious to my algorithm, which is not an AI checker because it actually caught a plagiarism case the other day, which was kind of funny. But it looks at behavioral issues with the submission, metadata around it, things like that. And I won't go into details because I don't want to provide anyone with the tool to get around it. But the end result is it changes the priority. If something looks suspicious, it goes to the end of the queue so that we can assign those to the right people, and so that we don't end up taking longer on a submission that was valid. So what we've told people is, don't worry if the submission system thinks you're suspicious. You might take a little longer to get a response. We're still human verifying all of them. Usually me doing that, but it's a lot of work, and this is the tip of the iceberg. Right now, these are still being manually submitted by people. The moment that they start using bots to mass submit this stuff, it breaks. Everything breaks.
So let's just play the what if game.
Okay.
So let's say, what if the bots come into the system and then you're getting tens of thousands of submissions just clogging up? I mean, is there a way to functionally get around that, or is that's it? We got to shut the doors because we can't do it.
We'll have to shut the doors temporarily, like we did in March, and in the week leading up to our shutdown, I started collecting a lot of extra data on every submission, and that's what allowed me during the month we were closed to go and figure out the patterns. And it's sort of like calling it spam is pretty good because it matches a lot of the same techniques for and credit card fraud and all of these things. Those are all different fields that people came out of the woodwork to help us when this happened. That experts told me, hey, try looking for this. Hey, try looking for that. Right. And we'll have to do that again. And I'm certain that we're going to close again.
Right.
It's
sort of feels inevitable, right?
Yeah.
Such a such a damn shame. I mean, I hate the fact that any of us have to do it, but I will say this, and Sean and Wendy, I want to hear from you as well. But I do very much appreciate the effort that you are putting in to sort of you're on the front lines and you're kind of doing yeoman's work. A lot of us don't have to deal with this, but you are, because you could just say, you know what, screw it, I don't have the patience for this, and you could do that, but you're fighting back, and I'm just speaking for me. I appreciate that. I really do appreciate the considerable effort and thoughtfulness that you put into it.
Well, thank you. I mean, for me, it's all about keeping the submissions open and allowing new people in, because the moment we can't do that, there's not much point. The field chokes and suffocates itself.
Fair enough. All right. So, Sean, what about you? Or what talk to me about how or if AI is impacting you from the the editor publisher standpoint.
I would say that since we don't pay as much as Neil does, and these people are primarily trying to get a paycheck out of this, that there's been less attention to the lower paying markets. So while I have seen AI submissions, it's been, you can count them on one hand maybe, and you can easily recognize them. They're not a real big issue for me, because the magazine is primarily literary, dark fantasy, and horror. And literary style is something that is not easily emulated, at least by AI right now. It knows how to put words together, but it doesn't make them sing like the best poetry can do for you. And so that might insulate the magazine for a little while. I don't know how long. I'm hoping for a really long time at this point. But at this point, the submissions are just so easily recognizable that they're not yet an issue. But since I am the only slush reader, if it did become like a mountain of it, then I would be crushed. Yes.
Fair enough. Well, let's hope that doesn't happen. Wendy, what about you? I mean, I know you said you were kind of in a quiet period, but what's your take on AI and how or if you deal with it?
Yeah, I feel a little bit spoiled because we opened for submissions last year and we just had such a large. I'm a very slow slush reader. I do not have Sean or Neil's amazing talent of reading slush. And I take a long time to make decisions because I'm just like that. And so I just had a huge pile of slush to sit on. And I just sort of like had my little dragon's hoard that got me through the spring. And then I was like, well, I have bought a lot of stories, so I don't have to open. So I haven't yet had to deal with AI. And I assume when I open in January, probably going to see some of those things, and to hope that our submissions engine has caught some in the spam filter, and when things inevitably go wrong, I'll probably be like everybody else and I'll be calling up Neil for advice.
All right, fair enough. So speaking of submissions, so they come in faster than you can possibly keep up with. So what can you tell us about what authors should do if they feel like they're being ignored, or in their minds at least unfairly passed over? Wendy, why don't you just keep going?
Sure. I mean, my advice would be like what I myself do, and it's just, I mean, we all have automated slush machines, right? Like you can look up and it will tell you if your story has been rejected. You can look up and it will tell you things like that. If you submitted a story and you check your spam filter and you check everything and you don't find like these things automatically spit out a receipt, basically. If you never got one of those, drop us an email and I will get right back to you and I will say, yep, that's here, or nope, it doesn't look like that came through. And in my case, you might be waiting 3 months. That's just how fast I read sometimes, and I don't have a ton of help, so that's just how long it takes. If you feel like your story got rejected and you're really sad about it, then you should go out to lunch with a friend and tell them about it, and hopefully they will make you feel better.
Just don't tell me.
If you email me, I will probably just delete your email. Although one time I did reply to someone, I said, I'm sorry that you're feeling so sad and that your feelings got hurt. And they never responded to that. I don't understand.
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem to matter. Yeah, I don't usually take an effort because I could be like emailing all day if I did that. It's already what I do all day is send emails. So
Fair
yeah,
enough.
that's your job as a writer, is just to accept that, you're playing the lottery. It's just like buying a lottery ticket. You probably won't win, but you won't win if you don't buy the lottery ticket. So submit, do your best work, just keep moving along.
Fair enough. Neil?
Well, obviously, don't send that email. Write it, but don't send it.
That's right.
Because if you send it to me, it goes in a folder, and I have a folder called Crank because I have hundreds of Crank messages. The one thing I do before I send out an acceptance letter is I look to see if you're in the Crank file, because I don't want to have to work with somebody who's difficult. If you're not going to be somebody who can handle being told this isn't good or this isn't what I'm looking for, or maybe you should do this differently, you're probably in the Crank folder. Now, the good news is that none of the people in the Crank folder have ever risen to the level of in 17 years, not one has managed to get to the point where I've found them again. There are some I remember, but there's one guy who has over 200. And it's what's really funny is about half of them are complaining about Strange Horizons.
Oh, really? That's
so not even the right magazine.
Not even the right magazine. He's special. We actually called him the Clarksville Stalker for a while because he was harassing some of our authors as well, until one of them put him in his place. The only response to a rejection letter, thank you, but even some editors don't want to see that. Move on to the next market. It wasn't the right place. It might still be a great story, but it wasn't the right market for that story. So just try somebody else.
Sean, anything to add? Anything different?
Not much. I pretty much maintain a similar folder. Though I have to say, I don't know about Neil, but in dark fantasy and horror, the responses I get are a little bit more threatening. We won't go further into that, but I've shown some to Neil, and Neil knows what I'm talking about. I just feel like in the horror field, some authors do take it a little too personally, and they want to lash out. The thing is you want an editor or a publisher to remember you for the right reasons and not for the wrong reasons. And I don't like to see responses to rejections at all. I mean, I'm already getting 600 submissions a month. I don't need to see a reply, even one that says thank you. I might take a quick look at it and then I just delete it. It's not a good use of my time and energy. I appreciate it, but I don't need it. And I would prefer to use that time and energy tackling the next submission, but don't respond to the editor, not in person, not an email. Don't leave them a message on their answering machine. I've heard that happen.
You mean they shouldn't stalk you like at the mall parking lot at the closing time?
No.
All right, that was great. But now it's time for a special segment on the show where we spin the wheel. On the wheel are 7 possible categories, which I created especially for this panel. Wherever it lands is what you get, and the categories are Good Fences, Good Neighbors, Dear Cthulhu, Quantum Leap, Space Saver, Creature Feature, Attack of the Clones, and The Truth Is Out There. All right, Wendy, you're up first. Wherever she lands is what you get. You ready?
Ooh.
All right, what do we got for you? Round and round, and you got Attack of the Clones. All right, what do we got here? God knows what I came up with. All right, so, all All right, if you could clone yourself so that 2 identical copies of you are out in the world, so you can see and do more than you ever could as a singular. However, the clone version of you may develop or enhance personality traits the prime you doesn't necessarily like, or is inconsistent with how people know you. Under those conditions, do you submit to being cloned?
You know, I think I'm going to say no, because as busy as I am, I don't think the world is ready for more Wendy's. And if you saw me at home, like with the constant, singing to the pets and just being really quirky, I don't think the world is ready.
All right, one Wendy is more than enough. All right, fair enough.
Yes.
All right, Neil, you're up next. All right, round and round. What do we got? All right, and you got Dear Cthulhu. All right, what do we got here? All right, so borrowing from my pal Patrick Thomas, Cthulhu has a popular advice column for wayward souls. The fan writes, Dear Cthulhu, I'm in a long-term committed relationship, but things are getting a little stale between us. I'm looking to inject a little more excitement into our lives. Any suggestions? Signed, Cosmically Unfulfilled.
And you want this answered from a Cthulhu-ish perspective?
Yes.
I am the wrong person.
Give it a shot.
No, I mean, I'm really the wrong person. I bounced off of Lovecraft.
Okay, he's like, I'm out. That's
Yeah.
that's it. Get out now.
Yeah,
All right,
sorry.
Okay, that's your response. Fair enough. All right, Sean. Here we go. What do we got for you? And you got creature feature. Okay. I like this one. All right. So what do we got here? Okay. You have stumbled across an amulet that turns you into a supernatural being. You get to choose which creature. What's your choice?
Supernatural being. Like a superhero or
No, creature.
Or creature with superpowers.
No, supernatural. Doesn't have to.
Supernatural. I'm blanking out.
Come on, you got supernatural, you got monsters, you got all sorts of good stuff to choose from.
For some odd reason, I'm thinking creature from the Black Lagoon, but he doesn't have any special powers.
Well, all right, creature from the Black Lagoon it is.
Yep.
All right, no.
Sean, I always pictured you more like a Godzilla stomping through.
That's a good one.
How about we'll split it in half. You'll be Godzilla from the Black Lagoon. All right. All right. Now we're gonna pick your poison. I got 4 options for you: A, B, C, or D. I'm not gonna tell you what's behind each one. All right, Sean, you're up first. A, B, C, or D?
C.
C. All right. We're gonna find out if you got thick skin. As writers, and for the purpose of this panel, as editors, we're all subjected to reviews, which can run the gamut. Wherever the review lands, the analysis can be insightful and thoughtful, while others can be obnoxious, mean-spirited, or even totally off base. How do you feel about reviews of your publication? Do you take them to heart? Do you let them roll off you? Or do some stick with you more than others? And do you ever get feedback that leads to changes in the way that you actually run your publication?
I don't see the ultimate judge of my work are the readers or my subscribers. I mean, if there are reviews, we're talking maybe a couple to a dozen out of, say, thousands, tens of thousands of readers or subscribers who are reading the work. It's their opinion that really matters to me. If they continue to subscribe or renew, great. But when it comes to reviews, I can take or leave them, to be honest.
All right, fair enough. All right, Neil, you're up next. You got A, B, or D?
D.
Is B as in boy?
D.
Oh, D. All right.
As in dog.
All right, we're gonna give you some truth serum. I got 10 questions that all deal with sci-fi, fantasy, and horror. All right, you ready? Twilight Zone or Stranger Things?
Stranger Things.
Watching
Oh,
horror.
no. That's totally wrong. It's the Twilight Zone. I thought you
Yeah.
said Twilight.
Twilight.
Like,
Oh, good
okay,
guy.
if it was Twilight, it was easy. Yeah, this is the COVID brain.
That's it.
What's
That's it.
going on there.
That's absolutely COVID brain. All right.
Yeah,
Okay, so watching scary movies, lights on or off?
on.
Okay, as an editor, what writer from any point in history, past or present, would you like to work with if ever given the chance?
Living or dead?
Yeah.
Philip K. Dick.
Oh, good one. Okay. As an editor, would you rather work with an outstanding writer who is an epic pain in the ass and will push your tolerance and sanity to the brink, or a solid writer who's easy to work with and amenable to edits?
The second one.
All right. Okay. Make your life easy. All right.
No, I don't need to deal with people who are like that. Life's too short.
Fair enough. All right. So which is scarier, unleashing a cosmic monster onto the world or being trapped in close quarters with one?
Ultimately, it's going to end the same way. I wouldn't want to be responsible for unleashing them. So that would be worse.
All right. Okay. You wake up to discover your life is a lie. Which rattles you more, to learn you're living with a space monster in disguise or that you are one?
I already know I am one. So living with one.
Do you think there are alien races in the reaches of space who would try to annihilate or enslave us if they made it here?
Probably.
Okay.
They're probably just like us.
Do you think aliens from other worlds live among us?
Probably not.
Do you think the government has secret facilities with alien technology?
I think they have secret facilities and they don't know what they've got.
If you could keep an alien as a pet, as long as it didn't harm you and obeyed your commands, would you?
Is it sentient?
Sure.
No. Because I wouldn't keep a sentient creature as a pet.
All right, fair enough. All right, we're going to take some questions from the audience. What do we got here? All right. Do any of you have time for personal reading? Do you read this, and do you read the same genre as your publication, or do you read other things?
Who wants to go first with this one?
So that'll be Sean.
I do have some time for casual reading. It does tend to be a mix of science fiction, fantasy, horror. But if I want something where I don't have to really think too much about it, mystery tends to do that for me, or I'll turn on the TV and watch an episode of Law and Order that I've seen 20 times before, and I know every second of this episode. It does make harder to enjoy casual reading. I think that's one of the drawbacks of being an editor, is that sometimes I can pick up a book. I just picked up a book that one of my children are reading, and I instantly saw errors all over the page. And we're not talking really obvious errors. And I can't help but look at it sometimes looking, oh, this should have been copy edited or proofread or whatnot. Which is why sometimes I might just read some mystery so that I can just turn that part of my brain off.
All right. Neil, have you ever regretted accepting or rejecting a story?
Not really, but there have been stories that I've rejected and then taken for years best science fiction of the year, because they weren't right for Clarkesworld, but they landed at the right market and had the right editor ultimately.
All right, fair enough. Okay, so I think we got time for one more quick one. All right, so how do you feel? So maybe this one will be one for Wendy. How do you view the interaction of writing short stories versus longer works? Do you think it helps to do both in terms of both the career and the writing process?
I think it depends on the writer. I mean, for me, writing short fiction was a great way to really get better at my craft faster than I could progress just writing novels, right? Because I could write a short story, send it out to people, get feedback, and then learn a whole ton about writing based off of, that experience. And that let me, I think, combined with, reading tons of slush and editing, I think that gave me a really strong sense of craft that has really helped me as a novelist. But if you hate writing short stories, then it's not worth it, right? Like, you may as well just focus on writing novels and learning about that the best way you can. And if you hate writing long, there's no point being frustrated about that. Just celebrate the fact that you like writing short fiction and be like Ted Chiang, right? He just writes short stories, and he's quite well recognized and has a great career. And so it is possible, although I do think like maybe the publishing world might be a little bit biased toward novelists, at least when it comes to paying money and things like that. But yeah, you can only do what you love, right? Like, there's no point being in this business doing things you hate. So if you
Fair.
like short, I think I have the best of both worlds, because I love to write short stories and I love to write novels. So I get to do it both, and I'm really happy about it.
All right, that's great. So we're almost out of time. I'm going to share my screen. We got a couple of goodies to share, and then we're going to call it a night. All right, so Neil, talk to me. What are we looking at?
That is the cover of one of our issues, from a few months back. You can find the magazine online at clarksworldmagazine.com, or listen to the podcast pretty much anywhere podcasts can be. If you want to get a subscription, we have a subscribe link on our website. Takes you to a bunch of different places, from Barnes & Noble to Patreon. We could really use subscriptions about now, with Amazon having swept the legs out for under most of us. I think all of us here tonight. And yeah, so read short stories.
Yeah. So is there anything else? Are there any new initiatives or anything new about the publication that you have in mind, or you've already put in motion? Just anything you might want folks to know about?
No, we're right now in damage control mode, courtesy of Amazon. Our main goal is surviving next year.
Just so folks know what for those who don't know, what happened with Amazon.
So for over 11 years, we were available for digital subscription on Amazon. We had thousands of subscribers there. And last year in December, they informed us that they were ending that and saying, well, if you want to do business with us, you have to go to Kindle Unlimited. And by the way, if you say yes, you're going to get about half of the money you used to get. So we said yes, and we're because we had no other choice. It was sort of like a hostage situation. We got half the money and needed to increase get as many subscribers over to other platforms as possible. We've gotten most of the way there. But our concern is that Amazon could, when they renew their contract with us, come in with a lower number, and we're suspecting it will be.
Well, let's hope not. And everyone out there, support Clark's World, support these publications. They're part of our ecosystem. We're part of theirs. So everyone, if you're fans, just consider subscribing. All right. So, Wendy, what are we looking at?
Oh man, I feel kind of like an idiot. I should have shared a cover from Nightmare, but this is my own project. This is like a novella that came out the other year of mine, and it was a fun project. And so anyway, if you're looking for a scary gothic novel, it's a short read. It's The Secret Skin. But yes, I'm also with Nightmare Magazine, and it's nightmare-magazine.com.
All right, great. Okay, and so Sean, what do we got?
Okay, so this is The Dark, issue 97. I think we're up to issue 102 now, and we can be found at thedarkmagazine.com. I'm in the same boat as Neil is in terms of just trying to maintain the business model that we have currently, trying to increase the number of subscribers to offset what has happened with Amazon, because I would love to keep paying authors the same rate that we've been doing for years, which is currently 5 cents a word. And Amazon has made it interesting with their latest moves. But if you like unsettling, uneasy fiction, The Dark is pretty much the place to be, and that we would love your support.
Right. Again, guys, if you're a fan, you like this kind of fiction, consider supporting The Dark and Nightmare Magazine. They're there for us. We're there for each other, and if we're not there for each other, no one's gonna have a home. So just consider it. All right. As for me, not short fiction, because although I do write plenty of short fiction, I'm really excited, especially now since we're wrapping up with the year. The fan reaction, I have to say, has been absolutely outstanding so far. I'm really excited to share my new book, Blunt Force Rising. It's the 4th novel in my ongoing series featuring hard-boiled private eye Angela Hardwick. In my mind, Hardwick is part Blade Runner, part Doctor Who, and part Sarah Connor from Terminator and Blunt Force Rising. So Hardwick and her partner, Eric Whistler, are providing extra security on a Galaxy cruise ship, which you can see right here, and for an AI, robotics, and cybernetics conference. But that event quickly devolves into a bitter argument between the pro and anti-android community. And for me, androids in this book are a surrogate for any marginalized group who seem to engender all sorts of hate for no apparent reason. Anyway, a murder takes place on board the cruise ship, and it sets off a chain of events, including a violent insurrection that will test lives, loyalties, and the very nature of humanity itself. It's also a locked room mystery thriller. So if you're up for some close quarters mayhem and a lot of cosmic blood and gore, this one is definitely for you. Blunt Force Rising is on sale in ebook and paperback from Crazy 8 Press and is available on Amazon. And in the meantime, I'll encourage you to check out the first 3 books in the series, Crackle and Fire, Fractured Lives, and Hot Ash. And I just want to be clear for those who are unfamiliar with the series, each novel in the series is a standalone adventure. I reintroduce the world building and the characters in each novel, so you can jump in at any point and read them in any order. While there is some character development throughout, so your mileage may vary on where you want to start. All right, folks, that's it for me. That is our show. I want to thank my panelists tonight. I want to thank Neil and Wendy and Sean for talking to us about their fantastic publications. That's not just our show, but that's our season. I'm your host, Russ Colchamiro, and if you want to see me in person, I'll be at PhilCon this weekend in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and I know Neil will be there as well. It'll be my last con of the year. As always, be kind, be gentle, and generous of spirit, and go read a book, or in this case, a magazine. And I'll see you in January 24 for a whole new lineup of episodes. Happy holidays, everyone, and that's our year. Be good and take care. Thanks, and bye now. Have a great year, and I'll talk to you in January. Bye now.